Entergy is proud to support programming on LPB and greener practices that preserve Louisiana.
The goal of our environmental and sustainability initiatives really is to ensure that our kids and future generations can be left with a cleaner planet.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.
There have been now, at the latest count, 10 inmate deaths in Louisiana state prisons, more deaths at a federal penitentiary.
Louisiana inmates and the coronavirus advocates say for many it's nothing short of a death sentence.
We do not provide any information about the patient. We simply tell them that they have been exposed.
What we all need to know about contact tracing and why it's so important.
All of us are being impacted by a great deal of loss right now.
Concerns about mental health and sources of help. Hi, everyone. I'm Natasha Williams.
And I'm Moreau. Much more on those top stories in a moment on this week's edition of SWI. But first, budget talks at the legislature.
And their initial crack at the budget, the House GOP largely backing the governor's plan to use federal coronavirus aid to close a nearly $1 billion gap caused by the pandemic.
Commissioner of Administration Jay Darden telling me we agree on a lot more than we disagree. The TOPS program, K through 12 school financing formula, and social services would be spared cuts.
But college campuses, health programs, and some other state agencies would see cuts. There is a disagreement over a hospital patient payment plan the governor favors.
At his coronavirus briefing late today, the governor was talking numbers. Coronavirus cases in the state continue to trend down while testing is ramping up.
Our goal for the month of May with respect to testing was to reach 200,000 tests. Today, May the 22nd, I can tell you we've gotten to 143,577. So we're on our way to meeting that goal. We are about 56,000 tests short of the goal with 9 days to go.
And here are some of the other highlights from the state capitol. State lawmakers are set to greatly expand Louisiana's medical marijuana to make more people eligible for the treatment under a bill that moved toward passage Wednesday. The proposal from Representative Larry Bagley, the Republican chair of the House Health Committee, would authorize therapeutic cannabis for any condition that a doctor considers debilitating. A bill to help legalize sports betting in Louisiana is close to final passage, though the wagering still would be a year or more away. The measure won easy passage Tuesday from the House Criminal Justice Committee and would let voters in each parish determine whether to allow sports betting in that parish on Election Day. No one on the committee objected to advancing Senator Cameron Henry's bill to the full House for debate. The Senate already overwhelmingly backed the idea. Two measures described as making it easier for people convicted of crimes to find and retain jobs edged closer to final passage Tuesday. A House-backed bill by Eunice Representative Philip DeVilliers would allow probation and parole officers to use their cell phones or other electronic devices to check on people under supervision, rather than requiring an in-person hearing. The proposal also requires probation and parole officers to accommodate a person's work schedule when scheduling those check-in meetings. A Senate committee on Wednesday rejected a bill by Senator Regina Barrow that would have expanded mail-in voting in Louisiana. It was the second straight day that Republican lawmakers defeated a bill to allow more mail-in voting to minimize health threats from the coronavirus. The vote on Barrow's bill was 6-3, with all Republicans voting against it and 3 Democrats voting for it.
And now some of the other headlines making news across the state. The State Department of Health lifted the curtain this week to reveal how the coronavirus has impacted nursing homes across the state. In Metro Baton Rouge and the surrounding 12 parishes, for example, the data shows despite making up about 13% of the recorded cases, nearly half of the region's deaths have come from nursing homes. Some of the most acute rates from rural parishes. Coronavirus concerns shut the door again on one location of the Office of Motor Vehicles. The OMV in Harvey on the West Bank of New Orleans opened after a 2-month pandemic closure, only to close within hours because of potential COVID-19 exposure from someone in the building. The office was to reopen after being sanitized. Bessie announced Cade Brumley as the new state superintendent of education. Brumley earned the post after 2 rounds of voting by board members among 3 finalists. Governor John Bel Edwards offered congratulations, saying Cade has a record of success as a teacher, coach, principal, and as superintendent of DeSoto and Jefferson parishes. Louisiana is among 3 Gulf Coast states getting $88 million in fisheries disaster funds from last year's flooding. The Bayou State is getting more than $58 million, Mississippi $21 million, and Alabama more than $8.5 million. Representative Garrett Graves says this finally rights some of the wrongs our state has been dealt. A report from last November counted the state's losses at $256 million because of high water and because of Bonnie Carey spillway openings. Senator John Kennedy announced this week that the National Science Foundation awarded nearly $4.5 million to the State Materials Design Alliance. The alliance promotes 3D printing research and education. LSU, Louisiana Tech, Southern, Tulane, and UL Lafayette are among the universities in the alliance. Storms have blasted through the state Sunday night sent 6 people to the hospital. Places with damage included the area north of Church Point in Acadia Parish and Mamou in Evangeline Parish. A suspected tornado damaged buildings and downed trees in Mamou, but caused no injuries. Former Angola warden Burl Cain is a confirmation away from being named Corrections Officer of Mississippi. Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves nominated Cain after a nationwide search saying Angola went from beatings to Bible study with Cain in charge. Also in the headlines, Louisiana is in line to receive about $600 million in federal money for broadband internet expansion. Many parts of the state are underserved with high-speed access. Public Service Commissioner Foster Campbell says the money is coming from the FCC and would come over a 10-year period. There's another item we're watching in the state capitol. It's a bill that would ban the use of e-cigarettes while in a car with a child. House Bill 109 expands the definition of smoke to include an activated aerosol or vapor. Currently, it's illegal to smoke cigarettes, cigars, or pipes while in a car with a child. Louisiana Public Square explored the potential health effects of using e-cigarettes or vaping in January, and you can catch an encore presentation of vaping in Louisiana next Wednesday night at 7 p.m. and Friday at 8 p.m. For more information, visit lpb.org/public square.
Contact tracing is a disease control measure we've been hearing a lot about lately, but local and state health departments have been using it for decades for preventing further spread of diseases, in this case, COVID-19. We talked to a state epidemiologist about contact tracing, a phone call that you might receive to separate fact from fiction. Theresa Sokol is the acting state epidemiologist. She says contact tracing is far from new, but essential in our efforts to stop the spread of COVID-19.
Contact tracing is a core public health disease control tool, and it's meant to help prevent the spread of infectious diseases. We've been using contact tracing here in Louisiana for decades. We've used it for diseases such as mumps, hepatitis A, and measles.
So we're hearing more about it now because it's important, because we're trying to find out the people who have COVID-19, kind of trace their path and stop the spread, correct?
So basically what we do for COVID-19 with contact tracing is we're trying to support the patients who are infected so that they can safely isolate themselves from other people to prevent any future exposures. And then we're also collecting information from these individuals because we want to know about individuals or groups that might have been exposed before they were isolated. And then we notify the contacts that we're able to identify about the exposure.
Let's talk about this privacy issue. A lot of people feel like they're going to be in some part of a database that somehow will be spread around or shared or something like that. How do you stop that misinformation from getting around?
Well, what we do is we try to talk about it. And we also spend a lot of time when we're talking with people who are ill, people who have been infected, and when we're talking to, when we're doing follow-up calls with the contacts of individuals that have been identified. You know, we really like to talk to them about all the security measures are in place. HIPAA training is extremely important. All of the individuals who will be speaking with patients and speaking with contacts have had extensive training in HIPAA, because we consider the information about patients and the information about contacts to be highly confidential, protected health information. And so we safeguard that to the same extent that we safeguard any of the information that comes into the Louisiana Department of Health.
She says it's also important to know
we do not provide any information about the patient. We simply tell them that they have been exposed, and we tell them the date of that exposure so that we can work with them to try to identify how long that they might need to be separated from others, how long they need to monitor themselves for signs and symptoms.
The state has been doing contact tracing since the beginning of the pandemic, but Sokol says now it's very important to do even more.
And what would happen while the governor's stay-at-home order was still in place, we would interview a patient, and we would ask about their close contacts or social gatherings that they've attended or travel, that sort of thing. And typically, they might identify no one. Usually they wouldn't identify anyone outside their household contacts. But now what we're doing is, because there's going to be more movement, there's going to be increased risk for transmission, what we have to do is identify every known exposure.
She says they are in the ramp-up phase of hiring and training contact tracers to prepare as the state moves through phase after phase and eventually is totally reopened.
We've trained a total of 300, about 300 so far. These are individuals that we've signed agreements with different call centers to hire these individuals, but they're working remotely. So they are located throughout the state of Louisiana. They've been hired. They're all Louisianans that have been hired.
Now, Sokol says they're prepared to hire about 700 contact tracers, but that'll depend on the number of COVID-19 cases that come in and the number of contacts that are identified. Also, beware, scammers are out there, and tracers will never ask for personal information like your social security number.
The country is on the verge of another health crisis, with daily doses of death, isolation, and fear from the coronavirus pandemic generating widespread psychological trauma. Some experts are warning about a spike in substance abuse and in suicide. But state health leaders are engaged and they're proactive. I talked with one of our public health leaders about managing collateral damage from the virus.
The more people open up and talk openly about just what they're dealing with at a given time, I think other people will be willing to share their stories and kind of help each other.
Reaching out and helping others is what Shelina Davis is all about. As CEO of the Louisiana Public Health Institute, she says the coronavirus is exposing the tremendous needs all of us have as we navigate this new, rugged terrain in our lives.
What's the main thing that concerns you from your perspective and what you deal with on a daily basis with this pandemic?
I think for me, the main thing that concerns me is the messaging. Is the messaging getting through to community members and community residents? I feel like, there are groups of people in our community that are taking this seriously, wearing masks to protect themselves and other people, maintaining physical distancing when they go out, also staying home whenever possible, even though we're in this reopening phase. And I think my main concern is, how do we reiterate those messages even amidst this phased opening approach?
From job worries, job loss, money worries, worries about when this will be over. With so many unknowns, Davis says it can be overwhelming.
There's so many extra stressors that have come upon us in every way, from every direction, and that can only put an impact on your mental health.
Yes, I mean, I think it's important for us to know that this is hard for all of us. No matter how this is impacting us directly, indirectly. I know even from my own personal experience, my husband tested positive very early on, and fortunately, he has recovered. However, all of us are being impacted by a great deal of loss right now, loss of our norm pre-COVID in terms of being able to go out and see our friends, loss of our jobs, as you mentioned, loss of life in many cases. So I think we all have to acknowledge that and grieve that appropriately.
LPHI is teaming with the Department of Health to provide resources. Some are the most basic: a number to call or text if you need help or someone to talk to. A help hotline at 1-866-310-7977.
And people can access that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And they have compassionate, trained counselors for people to talk to.
If you rather text, the same counselors can be reached by texting the words "reach out" to the number 741-741. The Institute for Women and Ethnic Studies is also providing a way to reach out. You can go to Healing is the Revolution at iwesnola.org. That's a virtual support group.
So I just think that it's important for us to utilize those resources, be in connection with our community members, with our neighbors, jump on Zoom calls or virtual calls, just to be a support to one another during this time.
Davis says it's important that we care for ourselves, especially now.
Just be a bit more mindful of what we're taking in. I mean, early on, there was so much on the news and on the radio, constant feed of coronavirus and impacts, and we didn't know who to believe and trust. And one of those things that we reminded ourselves is that it's okay. Let's put a limit on how much we pay attention to the news, focus on maybe one news station for a limited amount of time, and then step away from it. And then also just being kind to yourself and being knowing that we need to treat ourselves with some compassion because all of us are going through things right now. So just reminding yourself to do that every once in a while, I think is a good practice.
How would you address someone that feels like to do some of these steps that are considered being a good neighbor is somehow an infringement on their rights as a U.S. citizen?
Being in Louisiana, I feel like we care so deeply for our community and people. So, I understand, being in the United States, we're about freedom and our rights. However, during this time, I think it's important for us to kind of take a step back and say, even if I'm not visibly impacted, I don't have symptoms. We know we don't know a lot about this virus. There are some things we know and many things we don't know. Of the things we do know, we know that even if I don't have symptoms, that doesn't mean that I don't have the virus. And that doesn't mean that I'm not passing it on to others. And really wearing masks reduces the risk of us spreading this virus. I think in any faith tradition or spiritual belief, or even just somebody who just believes in humanity, I think us having kindness towards our neighbor and our brother is a teaching and value that's embedded throughout all faith traditions. So why wouldn't we practice that golden rule? Like, do unto others as you expect them to do to you, be kind to your neighbor, reach out to your neighbor. I think all of those values we've all learned in our state, I think can be put to practice during this time.
And all the resources you need to find are at ldh.la.gov/coronavirus.
A record number of inmates in Louisiana state and federal prisons have already died this year, victims of the coronavirus. Advocates say the cramped quarters and inmates, many who are at high risk to catch the virus, are facing what amounts to a death sentence. We talked to the advocate's Matt Sledge about a series of reports looking into the COVID-19 toll on prisons and jails. So tell me, just how bad is this situation with COVID-19 in prisons, state prisons, federal prisons? I mean, it seems like it's across the board.
Yeah, there have been now at the latest count 10 inmate deaths in Louisiana state prisons, more deaths at a federal penitentiary in Allen Parish, and then just dozens of inmates at local jails and state and federal prisons who have contracted the coronavirus, some of them with serious illnesses and others who are just asymptomatic, but nonetheless carried the virus.
Matt Sledge is a staff writer for The Advocate in New Orleans. He's part of a team of reporters who covers prison stories for the paper. He says early on, Louisiana jails and prisons had hoped to wash the problem away.
They've said from the start that they were limiting visitors and increasing hygiene, for example, making more soap products and available and disinfecting their prisons more regularly. And it seemed at the start like they thought that was going to keep the virus out of their prisons and jails. Inmate advocates always pointed out that no matter the preventive measures you take, there are still always going to be guards coming and leaving who are exposed to the virus in their home communities and then coming back to work at the prison every day. So those kind of initial restrictions on non-essential visitors and sanitation measures in large part appear to have failed.
He says prison officials have now stepped up their efforts.
The prisons and jails say they are separating inmates with positive infections into their own tiers or wings of jails. The state has created a special kind of coronavirus-only facility on the grounds of the Angola prison, which houses local parish inmates from across the states who have tested positive for coronavirus. The idea is that smaller parish jails don't have the facilities to care for these inmates themselves or to house them separately from other inmates. So the state is kind of taking them on. We
asked Sledge what he learned about inmates being tested for COVID-19.
The testing has been a very interesting topic from the start. You have to remember back in March, there just weren't that many tests. It was hard to get a test as a person out in the free world, and prison and jail wardens said they were having the same difficulty as everybody else getting a hold of these testing kits and actually testing their inmates. Some of those restrictions appear to have eased. Now it appears that symptomatic inmates are much more likely to get tested. And some prisons and jails have now moved into testing all of their inmates or large numbers of their inmates, regardless of whether they've shown symptoms of COVID-19.
And while inmate advocates have pushed for the release of low-risk and elderly inmates who face health issues that put them more at risk for COVID-19, Sledge says the number of inmates released early remains relatively low and somewhat of a political hot potato.
Inmate advocates have said from the start that one of the best ways to prevent this crisis from getting much worse is by releasing as many inmates as possible. In Louisiana, that has mostly taken the form of pretrial inmates being released. That means people who have not yet been convicted of any crime, who are sitting in jail waiting for their chance at trial. So in New Orleans, which I've covered extensively, the pretrial jail population has been reduced by about a quarter. And the sheriff and his wardens here have really welcomed that because it gives them a lot more space to separate people within the New Orleans jail. And there have been similar jail population reduction efforts in other parishes as well, like East Baton Rouge. On the other hand, inmates who have already been convicted of crimes, who are serving time largely in state prisons or in parishes where state prisoners are housed, are being released at much lower rates, and I think that's because Governor Edwards has been very reluctant to release people who have been convicted of crimes. Obviously, state officials say they have concerns about the public safety impact of that.
In New Orleans, all inmates and workers at the jail are being tested now. And at the Oakdale Federal Prison in Allen Parish, where a number of inmates have died, they now have a quick test machine from Abbott Labs. We, of course, will keep you updated as this story continues to unfold. We all know the traditional graduations didn't happen this year for high school seniors, but one took place this week in Baton Rouge that was as close to normal as possible. 64 outstanding Capital Region high school seniors got to walk across the stage and receive diplomas.
Yes, they did. The Louisiana Leadership Institute made this one happen with a whole lot of help. It was outside Tuesday evening in the parking lot and grass areas of the Institute, and there was a social distancing tailgating theme. The commencement speaker, Coach Ed Orgeron of LSU's football national champs, his words were timeless and they packed a punch. Coach O's arrival came from high above in an EBR Parish Sheriff's Department helicopter. But his message to these top graduates from schools across East Baton Rouge Parish was inspirational and down to earth.
Everybody has a dream. Everybody in here has a dream. I want to encourage you to chase your dream. That's your dream. God put that in your heart. He put it in your mind. That's for you. That's your path. We don't really know where our path is going to be, but if we follow it and we follow God and we do the right thing, it's going to happen to you.
Coach O told the graduates to block out the noise and don't listen to the haters. Baton Rouge Mayor Sharon Weston-Broome commended the grads for staying strong through tough times and for keeping a good attitude.
Your world is as big as you make it. And when we see you, we see great things and we see success.
The graduates each received a special $1,000 technology scholarship funded by the Every Kid a King Fund and the Boo Grigsby Foundation. Besides Coach O and the mayor, EBR Sheriff Sid Gautreaux greeted them on stage. State Senator Cleo Fields was proud he was able to help salute the students.
This graduating class, particularly East Baton Rouge Parish students, they've gone through a lot. From 2016 flood, to the 2020 pandemic. I mean, if there is any class that deserves recognition, it's this class.
And it's a great memory they will have. Well, that is our show for this week, everyone. Remember, you can watch anything LPB anytime with our app.
Download it for free from your app store. This upgraded version features news, public affairs, documentaries, how-tos, and many more programs. And please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
For all of us here at Louisiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Andre Moreau.
And I'm Natasha Williams. Thanks for watching.
Until next time, that's the state we're in. Stay safe.
Entergy is proud to support programming on LPB and greener practices that preserve Louisiana.
The goal of our environmental and sustainability initiatives really is to ensure that our kids and future generations can be left with a cleaner planet.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.